Hello again, everybody.
At the University of North Carolina, Dean Smith remains a legend. He was an anti-racist, coaching the likes of Michael Jordan, Vince Carter, Jerry Stackhouse, James Worthy, and many, many more. He would speak out against Jim Crow laws that plagued the South, including his school. In 1966, he recruited Charlie Scott, the first black scholarship athlete to suit up for UNC's basketball team. Scott would go on to win Olympic gold at the Mexico City Games of 1968, which also saw fearless protests of systemic racism plaguing the United States by American sprinters Tommy Smith and John Carlos on the podium. Smith's activism mentality likely came from his father, Alfred, who integrated high school basketball in Kansas back in the 1930s. Art Chansky, author of Game Changers, Dean Smith, Charlie Scott, and the Era That Transformed a Southern College Town, would tell WUNC Dean was a young boy at the time, but he grew up and watched his father deal with the pushback for the black players, and he had it in his mind that whenever he coached a college team, it was time for him to integrate it too. Smith fought, pushed, and helped UNC integrate at a time rife with racism. He walked into a segregated Chapel Hill restaurant in the company of a black pastor and black student in the late 50s to ensure they received service. He also spoke up on behalf of black friends, trying to cope with real estate agents who were steering them away from white neighborhoods. He was a staunch opposer of capital punishment his entire life, even when support for it nationally was over 80%, and even in a state where the death penalty was a matter of bipartisan consensus, he'd label it barbaric. He would call former Governor Jim Hunt a murderer to his face. In November of 1998, Smith pled for the life of death row inmate Jim Nolan. He also protested the Vietnam War and supported gay rights. He was one of the first to speak up for the players, his players, collegiate athletes, to get paid for their labor. John Feinstein, working on a piece on Smith, would write, "He leaned forward in his chair and in a very quiet voice said something I've never forgotten. You should never be proud of doing what's right. You should just do what's right." With all that being said, it's been troubling to see the way the current head basketball coach Hubert Davis has conducted business at Chapel Hill. A target of the right is Nicole Hannah-Jones, a Pulitzer-winning journalist and best-selling author who attended UNC. Some may remember in 2021, Jones was denied a tenured position at UNC after the university's board of trustees took the highly unusual step of failing to approve the journalism department's recommendation.
It was humiliating. It was deeply hurtful, and it was enraging.
It would be reported a mega donor by the name of Walter E. Hussman Jr. represented the opposing view, a 1968 UNC journalism grad whose name has graced the school since he made a $25 million pledge.
We will not be erased from the narrative of the country that our ancestors built. Education leads to liberation, and you can't keep people down who understand their history.
Conservatives despise her work for the 1619 Project, which they would label propaganda. Originally published in 2019 as a special issue of the Times, the project reframed the American story through the lens of slavery, where she won the Pulitzer. In 2016, Jones co-founded the Ida B. Wells Society for Investigative Reporting. It arrived in Chapel Hill in the fall of 2019, though it would be short-lived. Back in February, reports surfaced they'd be moving from UNC's campus to Morehouse. The society, named for the pioneering black investigative journalist, is dedicated to increasing and retaining reporters and editors of color in the field of investigative reporting and promoting diverse voices in news organizations. The issue is the university. Her alma mater is withholding funding, in essence, holding Jones and others hostage. The funds total about $4 million. With this move, or lack thereof, the program's work has come to a screeching halt. They were forced to cancel internships and plans in the works for high school students. Karan J. Phillips wrote of UNC's head basketball coach, "Davis is one of the most well-known players ever at UNC. He was an assistant when the NCAA alleged that the school had fake classes to help keep football and basketball players eligible. Guess what the classes were? African American studies. The kind of curriculum that would teach black students and white ones some of the things that are in Hannah-Jones's 1619 Project." Davis would tell 247 Sports last year, "Everything that I do is filtered through what I think Coach Smith and Coach Bill Guthridge would do. I know that they're not physically here with me, but it's very important for me to make them proud. Davis, the fourth black head coach in program history, has been silent. Via Phillips once more, this is why it hasn't been surprising that Davis has been so quiet about these issues. And whatever quotes or quips you might find from him on the subject simply aren't enough. Davis is an alum, which means he knows the plight of black people on that campus better than anyone. If a school can count the number of black head coaches it's ever had on one hand, it says a lot. Davis is the face of the most prominent athletic program on the University of North Carolina's campus, a place that's a basketball school. There's great power and responsibility in that. Hubert Davis just refuses to accept it. And yet he would say this about the torch being passed to him from Dean Smith. The drive and the determination are for the love of not just this program, but this university and this community. Even when I retired from the NBA, my wife and I decided to raise our 3 kids in Chapel Hill. So it's much more than just a place that we work at. It's home for us. What would Dean Smith say about this? A man who integrated, a man who stuck up for civil rights, a man who had no fear bringing a black student and a black pastor to a non-segregated restaurant. And here is Hubert Davis saying that he carries that legacy. Shame on him.